This is the lecture for Ancient and Medieval History for Friday, 4th March 2022. And what we have spent the last few days on is looking at the Roman military as the basis for Roman power. Now, this statement is rooted in the fact that Rome's military unites the empire. Even under the Republic, there was an empire, a growing number of territories around the Mediterranean littoral, and north into Gaul, up to the Rhine River, that were answerable to the Senate and people of Rome. These territories were governed by governors, both civil and military, depending upon the needs of the province. If the province was a frontier province, they would have a military governor. If the province was settled, interior, not a constant problem in terms of foreign invasion, they would have a civil governor. But all Roman officials had a mixture of civil and military authority. Rome is able to project this power at sea by ship, thus the coastline. The Mediterranean Sea is the central highway of the Roman Empire. And by land, because the legions, as military engineers, designed and built some of the best roads ever made in human history. These roads would go straight as a ruler from one horizon to the other, if possible. They were built several feet deep into the ground, with layers of sand and pebbles and rocks, all designed to create a road surface that was smooth and even and durable. Modern roads, as you know, every spring, summer, and fall, constantly need repairs. Well, the Romans kept their roads in repair as well. But since their roads were so much thicker than most of ours, and since they were designed to carry lighter vehicles than ours, some Roman roads are still in use. Now, they've been updated, but the Via Appia between Rome and Naples to the south is still used. Been paved over, used as a modern road, but it's still used. And there are bits of Roman road throughout Europe. Why would they build razor straight roads? We don't. Our highways snake around things. Well, it has to do with the way their roads were used as opposed to the way our roads are used. If you have a straight highway that's divided, every night you're going to see endless headlights right in your eyes. You're also going to get bored and you'll fall asleep more easily. And this is what they found. They built a very straight road in western Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh, and it had ridiculously high accident rates because it was straight. So modern highways are designed to undulate across the countryside, not because we can't blast our way through hills, but because it's better for drivers to have to constantly adjust to the road, keeps them awake, and it limits the amount of glare that you're going to get from oncoming headlights. But Roman roads were designed for Roman legions. Soldiers marched across the empire on these roads. As a result, even going a few hundred yards off course to go around a hill might slow the legion down. If you kept doing that, you would end up with roads that weren't optimized to move foot soldiers quickly. So the roads are designed to have people walk or take, horse and cart if you're a trader, if you're traveling with merchant goods, as quickly from point A to point B as possible. And the goal, as always, to make sure that the legions can get from where they are to where they need to be with a minimum of fuss. This was also part of Rome's approach to war. They engineered as much as possible before battle so that when the adrenaline hit the bloodstream, the Romans would benefit from a cold, calculated preparation for war that allows them to do things that people jumped up on adrenaline simply wouldn't normally do. The Roman system of battle, their weapons, their armor, their formations, their tactics, the roads they used, the bridges they built, the aqueducts they made, the city walls they constructed, the fortresses they built at strategic locations. All of it was designed to work to make the sum more than to make the whole, that is the entirety of the Roman military, more than the sum of its parts. Rome's economics is based on their ability to keep the peace. When Rome loses the ability to keep the peace late in the empire, their economics suffer. So, are there any questions, comments, or thoughts about Rome's military before we go into the history of the empire? I see none. The Roman Republic falls and gives way to a new form of government, the Roman Empire. But the Roman Empire is not at all monolithic. Like the Republic, it lasts for an awfully long time. Formally, it lasts from 27 BC with the accession of the Emperor Augustus to 476 AD, and that's just in the West. So we're talking over 500 years. In the East, the Roman Empire does not fall until the year of our Lord 1453, at the end of the Middle Ages. The Byzantine Empire, which is the Eastern Roman Empire in Greek, lasts for the entire 1,000 years of the Middle Ages. So the Roman Empire, like the Republic before it, has a much longer life than anything that we've seen here in our American Republic. We were born arguably in 1776 or in 1788 when our first presidential election happens. Somewhere between there, and it's 2022 now? So that's 250 odd years or so. So we're just a baby compared to Rome's Republic, which lasts 500 years or so, and Rome's Empire, which lasts another 500 years or so. Okay. The four eras of the Roman Empire are the Principate, the Pax Romana, the Crisis, and the Dominate. The Principate, roughly, is the 1st century AD, which is the years 1 to 99. It's actually from 27 to the accession of the Emperor Trajan, which is around the year 100, give or take. The Pax Romana, if you remember your Latin, means Roman peace. It is the high point of Rome's empire in terms of its wealth, its sophistication, its prowess compared to the areas around it. And it's peace. It ain't called the Roman peace for nothing. That's roughly corresponding to the 2nd century AD, the 100s. Then there's the Crisis. The heart of the Crisis is the 50-year period from the early 230s until the early 280s. It's the 3rd century AD. But the crisis actually begins before the end of the 100s. The crisis, history is not rocket science. It's not brain surgery. It's not brain science or rocket surgery. History is a pretty straightforward thing in terms of its nomenclature, in terms of its names. Whenever I hear the name nomenclature, I picture little pointy-hatted guys with long beards making clay pots. Nomenclature. Never mind. Anyway, nomenclature means system of naming. Just shake your head. That's all. That's fine. The crisis is called the crisis because the Roman Empire almost falls. It comes this close to being beaten to death by a series of foreign and domestic crises. Oh no. But it survives in the form of the Dominate. And the Dominate is a 200-year period from the end of the crisis, roughly, to the fall of the Western Roman Empire. The Dominate arguably continues in Byzantium for many hundreds of years after that. And the Dominate is what happens when you build yourself back from the brink of destruction. It's not the empire of Caesar or Augustus, the classics. It's much more similar to a cross between a medieval kingdom and a communist totalitarian police state. I'm not joking. I will explain exactly what I mean by that. The late Roman Empire may be Christian throughout much of its reign, but it is a very heavily regulated society where the government is involved in almost everything you do. It's not an easy time to be alive. So, talking about a very long term, and we're talking about 4 distinct eras. So, let's begin with the first. The Principate. Its rough dates are 27 BC to AD 96. Basically from the Emperor's Augustus accession to the end of the Emperor Domitian's reign, 96. Then Nerva and Trajan come in the late 90s. It's roughly contemporaneous with the 1st century AD. It starts a little early, it ends a little early. Now, the way government works in the Principate. Let's start with the title of the ruler. Augustus establishes an empire with republican forms. An empire with republican forms. Augustus establishes an empire with republican forms. Because the Roman people still have this romantic attachment to the notion that they govern themselves as free people, the armies of Rome continue to march under Senatus Populusque Roma, the SPQR emblems on their legions. And because the republican notions are still alive in the people of Rome in the time of Augustus, Augustus does not allow himself to ever be called king in any language. He is not rex or basileus or even wanax. Basileus and wanax are Greek words for king. Rex is, of course, the Latin word for king. Tyrannosaurus rex is the king of the terrible lizards. So, what does Augustus, who was born Octavian, of the house of Julii, prefer to be called? Princeps. Princeps. Now, a rough English translation of Princeps is principal citizen, like Mr. Julio-Claudians, principal here at this school. Principal citizen. But what it really means is the first among equals. I'm just a Roman, Augustus implies. I'm just like the rest of you. We're all equal, right? Of course, I'm first among equals. But we're all equal. I just happen to be first. That's no big deal. So first citizen is also a good translation. It's probably a better translation in terms of the meaning. So princeps means first citizen, first among equals. So Augustus is not going to claim any highfalutin titles. Augustus does not claim to be king, no, not at all, no, not never. While Augustus is he who commands, the imperator to the legions, Augustus does not prefer that term with his civilian relationships. Augustus preserves the Senate. Heck, Augustus is rarely even an official. He's rarely consul. Augustus feels no need, like Marius did, to become consul for life. yeah, he's just first citizen, that's all. He's first among equals. It is a republic in name, but an empire in reality. So the title Princeps is an example of this. Now, the Principate has two groups of emperors from two different dynasties. There are the Julio-Claudians, and they are the noble emperors. The noble emperors. They are Roman patricians with connections that go way back in Roman history. So, Julius Caesar is the uncle of Augustus. Augustus is of the Julii, descendant from the goddess Venus herself. After Augustus comes the Claudians, children of Augustus' wife Livia. And Augustus' wife is of the house of Claudius, the Claudian house. Now, the Claudian house is a much rougher house than the Julii. The Claudians have a saying, or people have a saying about the Claudians. There are two types of Claudians, the sweet and the bad. Because different Claudians throughout the history of the Roman Republic, some of them were some of the nicest, best leaders you could find. But others were depraved, vicious, brutal, nasty. And you were not going to get anything in between with the Claudian. You were either going to get somebody who's very sweet or somebody who's a bug nuts crazy. And we get both in terms of the dynasty. But basically they're all aristocrats. They're all patricians. They're all noblemen. So let's talk about each of them, starting with Augustus. Augustus is the most important Roman emperor, just as George Washington is the most important American president. Because Washington is the only American president who people beg to be king. George Washington said, "I did not replace King George III to become King George I." So then they said, "Why don't you be head of the Church of the United States?" To which Washington befuddledly shook his head and said, "Are you nuts?" Which is a version of no. To which they said, "Well, why don't you be president?" Praeses. It's an old Latin term for he who presides. "Yeah, I could be president. For life." "No! I'm not going to be president for life. That's just like being king. I won't do it." "Well, what if you run for office every 4 years?" "Sure." And they all assumed he'd just run until he died. No. George Washington holds 2 terms of office as president and then retires to his estate at Mount Vernon. Washington has no intention of being a permanent ruler, and he's replaced by John Adams. And there's a wonderful little song, a nasty song by King George in the musical Hamilton about George Washington leaving office and John Adams. I know him. I know, he's that little man. We met him once. So, George Washington is rightly called the American Cincinnatus, because like Cincinnatus, the great Roman dictator of the Republican era, he didn't hold office any longer than he felt he absolutely needed to. Augustus does not establish a strong monarchy in form. The Senate is still there, the political offices are still there, and for the most part, Augustus works through the old Republican Constitution. But everyone knows which side of the bread has the butter on it. First of all, part of Augustus' power is that the legions owe him personal loyalty. He is their patron. They are his clients. They are his soldiers. It's like today. In China, the military is not owned by the government. In China today, the military is owned by the Communist Party. The People's Liberation Army, the People's Liberation Army Navy, the People's Liberation Army Air Force and Aerospace Force and all the rest, they don't work for the government of China. They are the party militia for the communists. That means if push comes to shove, The loyalty of Chinese military forces is not to the government. It's not to the nation. It's certainly not to the people. It is to the leadership of the Communist Party. And they did that very, very purposefully. So while the legions march under the banner of the Senate and people of Rome, in fact, the legions work for the emperor personally. They are Augustus' troops. So if Augustus doesn't hold official office, if he's not the consul all the time, I mean, he's occasionally Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest. He's occasionally censor. He's occasionally tribune. He does a variety of things, but it's not it's never his official power that makes Augustus powerful. You know, Augustus personally owns all of Egypt. So do the later emperors. Egypt, after Cleopatra clasps the asp to her breast, Egypt becomes the personal property of whoever runs Rome. And Egypt is the wealthiest farmland in the entire empire. The Egyptians have a massive population in a small river valley of 4 million people. And the Egyptians grow boku grain. In fact, it is Egyptian grain that becomes the source of food for the Roman proletariat. Oh yes, remember them. They have not gone anywhere. Because even though many of them become legionaries, there's still this sticky problem of the urban poor, the Roman mob. So, what to do? Well, let's give them bread. So the emperor's grain is shipped to Rome on a regular schedule, and it is distributed free to Roman citizens as welfare payments. So the proletariat, as well as the army, is owned by the emperor, because without the emperor's grain from Egypt given to them freely, they would risk starvation. They would even die. So the emperor, unofficially, controls the military. He controls the Roman mob. But that's not all. Because the Roman emperor writes up through their role as censor the lists of citizens and the list of citizens that are liable to serve in public office. So the Senate is composed of people who, while not officially under Augustus's thumb, unofficially know that if they push it, he could have them removed from office, he could have them removed from the citizenship rolls, and of course he could send men to arrest them, throw them in jail, or just kill them. Don't mess with Augustus. But his power is indirect. He is scrupulous about maintaining the forms of the republic. Why? I use this story because it's vivid. It's a little icky, but it's vivid. Man comes home early from work, has gotten a promotion, wants to surprise his wife, take her out to dinner, and he finds her in the bedroom in flagrante delicto with the pool boy. Pool boy dives out the window, peels away in his van, doesn't even bring his little brush. And the man is in the living room thinking he doesn't know what to do next. And the wife cleans herself up and comes out and says, honey, I know it looked bad, but you got to understand it's not what you think. No. See, the pool boy accidentally flipped his keys through the open window of the bedroom, and we were looking for them, and we got to joking around. We got into a tickle fight. That's all you saw. It was just a tickle fight. There was nothing innocent. There was nothing bad going on. I wasn't being unfaithful. It was perfectly innocent. Who are you going to believe, me or your eyes? And what she's really saying is, if you make an issue of this, the marriage is over, and your entire life's going to change right now. It'll never be the same. And you might lose in divorce court. You might lose the house. You might lose the kids, if there are kids. You might lose the pets. Yeah, you caught me. But there are reasons, and I can cite them, and divorce courts tend to favor women anyway. So Who are you going to believe, me or your eyes? And it's blackmail. Now, there's also the implication, yeah, you caught me, therefore I owe you, therefore you're going to win the next few arguments that we have because I owe you. But what it really is an invitation to deception, willful deception, self-deception. If the husband makes believe that his wife was just having a tickle fight, then everything can seem to go on as before. In reality, though, he's accepted that he's a cuckold, that she's having sex with other men, and maybe if there are future children, they won't be his. That's bad. That undermines everything real about the relationship. But it preserves the forms. Augustus is like that. Romans, you're free. You're just as free as you ever were. Yes, you are. You're so free. You're the freest people on earth. I'm just an everyday Roman citizen. I'm first among equals, but we're all equal, aren't we? The Senate still meets and has its debates, and sometimes I even lose. Yes, Augustus is smart enough to sometimes propose ideas and have them rejected, just so it's clear that the Senate is still in charge. Do you understand the level of deception that's going on here? And the truth is, it's not really fooling anyone, because the Roman people know full well who has the power. Yet, it's enough to give them plausible deniability. Plausible deniability. If you're a beat cop, patrolman walking a beat in uniform, and you walk by an alley and you see two guys fighting, nobody's noticed it but you. You have the option to decide what to do about it. If you know the two men and have a sense of why they're fighting and think they need to work it out, maybe you'll keep walking for a while. Keep an ear on things. Make sure that the fight doesn't get out of hand. But you might let it go. Now, a patrol officer, or should I say a patrol car, could just as easily drive by and not really notice. But if they're called to deal with the fight, then they have to respond. They don't have any leeway. A patrolman has the leeway to decide how to act if he's the first person on the scene. So if somebody asks, why didn't you stop that fight? He can say, what fight? I didn't notice anything. I just walked by the alley. Silly me, I must have missed it. Plausible deniability. In the 1930s, after the Nuremberg laws are passed in 1935, Jews begin to disappear from daily life. Teachers, doctors, government officials, soldiers, army officers, business owners, they just begin to go away. And after the war, when asked about this, most German people say, we didn't know. We didn't know what was going on. I mean, I've told you about Kristallnacht. That's the last time Hitler put it in the faces of the Germans what he was doing to the Jews. After that, he did everything with an eye to plausible deniability, so that the German people wouldn't know, or at least they could tell themselves they wouldn't know. With plausible deniability, what you do is you give people enough cover so that if they don't go out of their way to connect the dots, they don't see the whole picture. This is what Augustus did with the Roman Republic. If you don't consciously think about it, and you just ignore it like it's in your peripheral vision, Rome can still look like a republic, but it's not. It's an empire. Now, Augustus cuts taxes and reduces the size of the military. Please note this. Please, after noting an empire with republican forms, which you should already have written down, you should note that Augustus cuts the size of the military and cuts taxes. I'll explain why and how. The Roman military at the end of the civil wars had hundreds of legions. Augustus reduces the number to about 20. That's a massive reduction in the size of the army, even if the legions of Augustus are bigger and beefier. Why? Well, because during the Civil War, the legions existed to fight for their general to become the leader of Rome. That's been settled. Augustus is the leader of Rome. Therefore, all we need the legions for is to keep the peace against rebels and to keep the peace against foreign invaders. And if we do that, all will be well. So Augustus doesn't need the massive number of legions that used to exist. Also, the Roman Republic had expanded and expanded and expanded because men like Caesar wanted to get glory as a step towards becoming the leaders of Rome. That's why Caesar conquered Gaul. That's why he did a raid into Germany and a raid into Britain, because he wanted victories. But now that Augustus is in charge, that need, that political need for Roman generals to have great victories is much, much less. So what Augustus does is he stabilizes the borders of the empire. Here in North Africa, you see the border of the region of the coast with the Sahara Desert. Everything south of this is not part of Rome, but the Romans control this entire coastal region, as well as the Nile River Valley and the area of Egypt. Augustus stabilizes the frontier with the Parthians, and even gets Crassus's eagles back as a sign of respect for the Parthian great king. He stabilizes the borders in the eastern mountains here. The Danube River, the longest river in Europe, becomes the border of Rome. And the Elbe River becomes the border of Rome. The Elbe River includes what is today Western Germany. So these are the borders of Augustus's realm, roughly. Augustus is still willing to use client kings like Herod the Great to rule Judea. And there are other client kings that Augustus uses because it's easier, requires less manpower. And Rome is not directly on the line whenever anyone's dissatisfied. They can blame the local king, like they blamed Herod. So Augustus is able to reduce the size of the military further because instead of trying to conquer vast new realms, Rome's military becomes a force to keep the borders secure. Now, one of Rome's greatest military disasters happens under Augustus. When Augustus is an older man, it's around 4 AD, there is a rebellion between the Rhine River and the Elbe River in what we now call Western Germany. The rebellion is led by a Germanic chieftain named Arminius. The Germans call him Hermann in their histories. Arminius was the son of a German chieftain who was raised in Rome as a hostage. So Arminius learns Latin, reading and writing, and Arminius learns how Romans think and how they organize and how they fight. So Arminius is not some rude barbarian leader who doesn't understand Rome. Arminius is a person who knows Rome very, very well. Anyway, the tribes in Western Germany become restive and start killing Roman officials. The Roman governor in Western Germany is a man named Quintilius Varus. Varus is a politician more than a general. And Varus decides he's going to punish the German tribes. He's not going to mess around. So he organizes 4 legions. Gotta check this. I think it's 4 legions. It may be 3, but I'd better check to make sure because I don't want to give you wrong information. Let's see. How many legions did Varus have? 3. Okay. See, I knew I was wrong. Thank you, Magic Fox. So, still, 3 legions is a major part of Augustus's military force because he's reduced the number of legions again. Varus marches into the forests of Germany. He keeps his forces together. He does not send out extensive scouts because they keep getting killed. So instead of sending out stronger scouting parties, he just says, the hell with it. We're sending the legions in, blind. And his officers protested, but Varus said, who's in command? I'm in command. We're just marching. There comes a stretch of forest called the Teutoburg Forest. In the Teutoburg Forest, the paths that the Romans are on are sinuous and thin going through the trees. So the Romans can't march in groups. They end up strung out along several miles of forest path. This thin little group of Roman soldiers in the midst of the German forest. And these Roman soldiers do not have scouts out. At Teutoburg Forest, Teutoburger Wald in German, Arminius strikes from both sides. And the Romans are like a thin little worm fighting a bunch of badgers. 3 legions are lost, they disappear, they're gone. Their eagles are gone. Varus is killed. Suddenly it becomes clear that since Varus was using the frontier forces up here, if the Germans wanted to, they could even march into Italy and attack Rome itself. When Augustus hears this word, he changes from being a content, happy older man to being a very frustrated, angry old man. He sends his son-in-law Tiberius north to fight. He sends other relatives to fight in Germany and punish the Germans, but he pulls the frontier back from the Elbe River, which is a fairly short river, to the Rhine River, which is a much longer river. Later in the empire, this is going to be an important decision. Had the Romans had a shorter frontier because of the Elbe River, they might have done better near the end of the empire. But even under Augustus, they couldn't hold Germany. Not unless they wanted to wage a constant high-grade war there, and Augustus didn't. But for the rest of his life, on bad nights, Augustus would be found wandering the palace, occasionally shouting, "Quintilius Varus, where are my eagles?" To no one in particular. Augustus is said to have found Rome brick and left it marble. And there's truth to this. Augustus finds a city largely built of brick tenements called insulae, islands. These are 4- and 5-story apartment buildings that the Romans lived in. And what he does is he builds a number of massive gravity-oriented public works. And these massive public works all have marble frontage. So Augustus beautifies Rome. Now, he is a good politician. He reconciles the Romans to being ruled. He also cleans up Rome's bureaucracy in this sense. When he takes power, when he becomes Augustus, Imperator, Princeps, all of that, he calls all of his governors in to a meeting before they go back out to the provinces to rule. And he says, "Gentlemen, you have important jobs. You are the face of Rome on the frontier. What you do echo in the memories of people for hundreds of years to come, because you are Rome. Now, I understand that Marius arrives in Iberia poor, and after just a term as governor, he comes back the richest man in Rome. I understand that under the old system, to become governor of a province was a license to steal, to extort, to get kickbacks, to get bribes. I understand that. But you've got to understand that in the old days, when you stole like that, you were stealing from the Senate and people of Rome. Now, you'll be stealing from me. I hope we're clear. He enforces anti-corruption laws on the bureaucracy for the first time in hundreds of years, really since the end of the Second Punic War. And he saves a lot of money that way, because governors that get rich off of their provinces through illegal means, well, Augustus finds out, because they're taking his money. It's not the people of Rome, not the Senate of Rome, it's Augustus himself. Now, a lot of times in the movies, Romans are played by these British actors. And the empires of Rome and later of Britain are compared, and the Roman emperors are sort of like Queen Elizabeth II, and these sort of stodgy British people. No. Roman emperors were a lot more like mafia crime bosses than anything else. You want to understand the Roman Empire? Watch The Godfather, the movie in its entirety, and you'll have a sense of how Augustus and the other emperors really were. Oh, they'd have a genial face on the outside. They had good public relations. Yeah, we're still a republic. But if you messed with them, they would not stop at go. They would not collect $200. They would just kill you. Or they would make an example of you. They would make you wish for death. They'd put you on an island somewhere. Well, we'll talk about this right now. There is a problem with the Augustan system. And the problem is, Augustus doesn't have any children with his wife, Livia. He has nephews. He has a daughter called Julia. Julia is from an earlier marriage. Julia is not Livia's daughter. Livia is Augustus's wife. So Augustus has a daughter, and she has a couple of children. So Augustus has grandchildren. But Livia has a son that's older than any of them called Tiberius. And the story goes, Livia wants her son to become emperor. But there are no less than 3 grandchildren ahead of him. And if his daughter Julia, if Augustus' daughter Julia has more children, they'll all be ahead of Tiberius too. What to do? What to do? So Livia arranges for her son Tiberius to marry Julia, because her son and Julia are not at all blood related. Her son Tiberius is by another husband, and Julia is from another wife. In any case, the marriage is arranged. But to do this, Tiberius has to divorce his first wife, Vipsania, who he loves. So Tiberius is always rather cold to Julia. In fact, I'm screwing this all up. It's Friday. Before this, Julia's young husband Marcellus dies under mysterious circumstances with green slime coming out of his mouth and nose. Many people believe that Livia poisoned him or had him poisoned. Her doctor was in charge as he died. So Julia's first husband, dead. She's now a widow. Then Julia is married off to Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa. the low-born admiral that gave Augustus victory at Actium. But Agrippa's old. They have some kids, and then Agrippa dies. So Julia is twice widowed. So then they marry Julia to Tiberius. But it is not a successful marriage. So what happens is, Julia begins to find entertainment elsewhere. In fact, she begins to find a lot of entertainment elsewhere. The man she loved died of maybe poisoning. The second man that she kind of loved was old. Now she's married to a guy that she thought she loved, but he's really a cold fish. So she starts sleeping around. And everyone knows it except Augustus. To Augustus, Julia is still his innocent little girl. Livia finds out about this. She knew. Livia gets a spy to record the comings and goings of every person that goes into Julia, Augustus' daughter's bed. She then has the information leaked to Augustus, including the list. Augustus is beyond livid, beyond furious, beyond outraged. In the middle of the night, he gets the Praetorian Guard to arrest every single person on that list and bring them to the palace. He has them all lined up, and it's a long line. And he goes around. Senator Ahenobarbus, did you sleep with my daughter? Yes, Caesar. Consul Flavius, did you? Yes, Caesar. And he just goes down the line. Yes, Caesar. Yes, Caesar. Yes, Caesar. Yes, Caesar. Yes, Caesar. And finally he exclaims, "Is there anyone in Rome that has not slept with my daughter?" So, Julia is arrested by her angry father and is sentenced to life imprisonment on the island of Pandataria. Pandataria is an island that you can walk from one end to the other in about 5 minutes. It's a rock in the middle of the sea. And the only people with her are a group of guards that she absolutely positively cannot sleep with because of battle injuries and things like that. This is basically a form of a death sentence, but it's not going to happen quickly. It's going to happen slowly. After that, all of the children of Julia end up dying. Mysteriously. One of them falls out of a boat and drowns. The other is killed hunting. I mean, it's a horrible set of accidents. So who's left but Tiberius, the son of Livia, who Livia wanted all along to become the next emperor. Augustus, the rumor is at the end, clued into this and was afraid that his wife might poison him, lest he change his will against Tiberius. He would only eat figs that he plucked from his own trees in his own garden. So she smeared poison on the figs and got them into the figs. That's the story. In any event, he dies and Tiberius becomes the next emperor. Now, this reveals the great Achilles heel of the Augustan system. It's an empire with republican forms. But one of the things about a monarchy that Augustus absolutely does not do, cannot do, is say, since I'm the Princeps, my son, adopted or biological, or my grandson will be the next emperor. He implies it, he puts it in his will, but it's never set up in law. In a monarchy, we always know who's going to be the next ruler if the current ruler dies. When Queen Elizabeth dies, her idiot son Charles will become Charles III. The first King Charles got beheaded in the English Civil War. The second King Charles, James Charles, got exiled in the Glorious Revolution. Charles is not an auspicious name for English kings. And this guy's going to be Charles III. He's deeply unpopular. Honestly, if he cares about the monarchy, he'll advocate in favor of his son William immediately and go into retirement. But I doubt Charles will do that. You always know who's going to be the monarch when the old monarch dies. But since Augustus's monarchy is all hidden behind the scenes and plausibly deniable, there is never a law about imperial succession. Write these words down. Imperial succession. There is never a law about imperial succession. S-U-C-C-E-S-S-I-O-N. And since there is never a law about imperial succession, unless you have a very successful, well-organized emperor, there's always a question mark when the old emperor dies, who the new emperor will be. And this one flaw will destroy Rome more than anything else. And we'll talk more about that next week. Have a good weekend. Remember, you have chapter survey due. Chapter survey 7B is due on Monday, and there will be a Baker quiz also. Ta-ta.